Good morning. I've put together some thoughts on a piece I'm going to call Geometry, Mind, and Identity. Geometry, Mind, and Identity. I'm reading this fellow who's huge on kind of fighting and winning and accomplishing and producing more, ever more quickly, ever more beautifully, or like reaching perfection and accomplishing and winning and the like. That's not my personal obsession, but this set of elements, or what this person introduces by way of seeking these outcomes, many of them are extremely valuable in what I think personally, what I think life, the elements of life that are important for us to ponder or consider. These are things like: are we reliable? Do we contribute reliably, constantly? Are we stable? Are we peaceful? Or do the people around us benefit from the impact of our actions and our relationships and things like that? And I think many of the same elements contribute to either life orientation. So I want to read a little bit from this stuff I was reading this morning from this accomplishment guy, and then he begins to explain. The body has the goal to live. So our physical body, that which kind of carries ourselves around for 50, 70, 100 years, it's hardwired with its own goal. It doesn't have to seek one out. It doesn't have to go meditate or ponder or go into long walks in the woods or a year of travel. Or it already has its all-consuming purpose. It's built that way. The physical body, which carries us around and which many people mistake for myself, has its own natural, innate, inbuilt, hardwired goal and purpose. It's a free gift. The physical body has no troubles. It just wants to live. Once it accomplishes that, it seeks other things: sex, food, movies, whatever. But there's no worries there. He goes on to write, if the body loses its drive for living, if the way is blocked, it dies. So it has a goal. If the physical body itself, if that goal is occluded or obstructed or interfered with or taken out, like pulled out, it dies. He writes, the same is true of the spirit. Therefore, we seek a goal also. So for the spiritual side of ourselves, that side of ourselves which is not only intellectually curious, we want to learn more, we want to explore more, we want to travel more, we want to see more. These are not just parts of the physical will or purpose to live. There's something more going on. And so the spirit also needs, similarly, a goal. But, let me see, this provides our spiritual and intellectual. Yeah, this goal provides our spiritual and intellectual side its same purpose to live. That's why a goal is necessary. So the body can reliably do frantically, desperately, at life and death passions. I mean, we can climb mountains, we can pull down trees. If the body needs to live, what it will do to live, there are no bounds for it. It increases its strength, it increases its endurance. It will do anything to live. Similarly, our spirit needs something like that. And as he wrote up above, if the body loses its drive for living, if its goal, its primary goal, is taken away, it dies. If its primary goal is blocked, it dies. But our spiritual side, what functions in that fashion, like the goal to live? The spiritual side doesn't merely just have the purpose to survive, to live physically, to find water, to find food, to find rest, to find shelter, to protect it from expiring. What provides that to our spiritual and intellectual side? He writes, that's why a goal is necessary. The purpose of the body is mechanical. It's given, as I just said. But the spirit and the mind, on the other hand, is free and open. It's free and open. The spirit is not hardwired with its own pre-established drive that will ultimately make it manic beyond measure. It doesn't have that. Since the mind thinks through the body. That's the whole mind-brain thing, which I've discussed on earlier times. The mind thinks through the body. That's what's going on. Neural synapses and the brain firing away, calling up recollections, remembering where some book is on the shelf, or remembering some keystrokes which lead to information. The mind uses the body to think, and because of this, and here's the thing that really, first of two main things that really caught my interest. Since it uses the body to think, so it will keep wandering horizontally if an independent concept is not established. It will keep wandering horizontally if an independent concept is not established. So the mind is free and open. It doesn't exist at the outset with a hardwired, driven compulsion the way the physical body does. But the mind thinks through the body. We have our existence through the body, at least for the time being. And thus, as we think, as we unfold as spiritual entities, we will just keep wandering horizontally if an independent concept is not established. The goal, finding a goal, is what determines what is the center point, and this creates an independent being. So that's why I use the word geometry in the introduction of this piece. So now we can think of things very simply. We have this entity, the physical body. It has the marvelous gift of being hardwired and built from scratch with a goal which drives it. Thus, it's reliable. You can always count on the body to find water if it needs it, to find food, shelter, the things it needs. It is hardwired and naturally driven. It's not a confused entity, our physical body. The spiritual or intellectual side of ourselves is free, deliberately. If you're a believer, if you're religious or spiritual, and you believe that there's a divine element that created us or me or you, you recognize that freedom is an absolute requisite for that side of ourselves. For us to be meaningful in any way, there must be freedom. And the more spiritual we get, the more we discover that our freedom by identity, by innate created nature, it must be radical and complete. But that means then that it's the exact opposite. It's not hardwired with a pre-established or predetermined goal or purpose. So a goal is necessary. That's what will make the spirit similar to the body in its constancy, in its reliability. That you can be guaranteed that it will do what it will do. It won't change. It won't wander. It won't. It's like, oh, I like Beethoven. Oh, I like. You meet people who know millions of things, but what's the point? They'll go on and on and on. They'll go from one thing to another. It's just traipsing down a series of links and jumps and leaps and ponderings and stallings and stops and starts. And yes, they're interesting, I guess, for a minute or two, or if they're in your life and you can't do anything about it, then they got to be a little bit interesting your whole life. But what's the point? What's the point? Yes, you went to France. Oh, great. Or you drank this bottle of wine. Okay. So what's introduced here is that the spirit side, the free side, the mind side, similarly needs to establish its own corresponding type of thing that the body naturally has. Body naturally has the goal to live. The mind is infinitely free. It's deliberately, by God, if you will, deliberately created to be infinite and free. So what this guy I'm reading says, that's why a goal is necessary, and he goes on to say the goal refers to what's the center point, and that's the geometry of it all. So we are in fact meant to expand infinitely horizontally. It's good that from Beethoven you go to Brahms, from Brahms you go to Bach, from Bach you go to like just 4 notes in a register, and then you're stuck on those 4 notes until suddenly you find yourself at Thelonious Monk. That's life. That's what the mind does. It does expand infinitely, but we don't want to be people that at the end of the day, okay, what's the point? What's the point? And what's introduced here is establishing a goal determines what's the center point. As soon as we have a center point, then all horizontal expansion falls into some reliable definition, some constant definition, something that makes your identity. That makes you infinitely interesting is that everything you discover, everything you traipse into, if you can make the leap from Bach to Thelonious Monk, that's interesting because we know you, we know what you're trying to do, we know that you're constantly, reliably giving in a particular way to constructive circumstances for the people you know, for the environments you're in, for the workspaces you're in, that the goal is at the center. The center. It's what I call, or not I call, it's what's known as the centripetal force. When we were young, we knew about centrifugal, we may have learned, centrifugal force, which means pulling outward, and centripetal force, which means pulling inward. So if you tie a rock to a string, wing it round and round, it makes a buzzing sound and a beautiful circle that you can almost see. That's the product of both a centrifugal force, the rock pulling out, and a centripetal force, you pulling in, and that creates a center, that creates an identity, that creates a thing, other than the rock just flying out into infinity, never to be found, or for no purpose or no instance, other than just that one moment where it sails off. So the goal determines what's the center point, and this creates an independent being. And by an independent being, I mean exactly you, and each and every listener and each and every person not listening. I want to know you, and that's that center, and that's that goal, and that's what begins to provide the centripetal force, or provide definition to the infinite expansion of the free spirit and free intellectual inquiry that we were deliberately created to have. The final line of this fellow is therefore, or thus, or didn't even say thus, but the goal should be established properly at the beginning and then should not be changed. Once we have this, we have something that matches the mad and constant and fantastic drive of the body. If we can establish a goal that becomes the center, that becomes our identity, that becomes something as reliable, and which produces a drive as passionate as the body. How fantastic that our infinitely free mind suddenly becomes as passionately, as by nature, passionately pursuing our raison d'etre, our identity. Exactly you expands infinitely once the goal is established at the center. I introduced geometry only because this concept of center as a goal for something infinitely expanding, and the horizontal expansion of mind in its freedom. And so to establish identity, which means, for me anyway, to be reliable and infinitely interesting, infinitely to be related to, is your identity and the way you give and the way you learn and why you go where you go mentally and spiritually. This becomes, thus we become individuals who can't get enough of each other and who are infinitely fascinated by each other. Thanks a lot for listening to this. I'll talk to you again soon.